Okay, if I could have everybody please stand. We'll open the Planning Commission meeting for February 18th of 2026. Everybody standing, please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have a roll call, please?
Before we do roll call, I do want to alert the Planning Commission that Stacy Phillips did resign from the commission due to her busy work schedule. So I just wanted to let everyone know before we start off the meeting, and then Maria will do the roll call for everyone else.
Commissioner Hicks,
Here.
Commissioner McHouston,
Here.
Commissioner Mild,
Here.
Commissioner Mullins,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Here.
and Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like our first item on the agenda is election of officers. Mr. Matlock.
Yep, as part of kind of every year, the reorg of the Planning Commission. And so process will go where we open up the nominations for the chair of the Planning Commission, and people can feel free to nominate someone, and then we can do a roll call vote or a simple vote, and then we'll do the same thing for the vice chair. So at this moment, if there is anyone that would like to make a nomination for the Planning Commission chair, we can entertain that now.
I'd like to nominate Dennis as chair, please.
Okay. Seeing no other nominations, we'll do a vote. All those in favor for Dennis Miller as the Planning Commission chair, say aye.
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 Okay. Congratulations, Chair Miller. And then now we'll move on to the vice chair, and we'll take nominations for the vice chair.
I will nominate, somebody have, I'll nominate Mr. Mill.
All right.
Second.
Okay. Seeing no other nominations, all those in favor of Commissioner Mill as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
All right, congratulations. So we can pretty much stay in the same seat. I think Commissioner Mullins and Mild will have to swap seats, but that's it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Who's switching?
You.
Me?
Whoa. Sorry about that. I should have grabbed that.
Are there any public comments that are not, for items not on the agenda tonight?
No public comments on items off the agenda.
Okay. Next item we'll move to is the consent agenda.
The consent agenda is the December 17th meeting minutes.
Planning Commission meeting of December 17th, 25.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I need to recuse. I was not present.
Okay, you can do that when we go to vote.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I recuse. I was not present.
Okay. Then we'll go into our next item of business, item number 2.
All right, thank you, Chair and Planning Commissioners. Before you is the architecture review, TS number 26-0001, which is for a 63 square foot chili sit-down restaurant at the Yucaipa Point project. So this right here is kind of the southeast corner of Yucaipa Boulevard and Avenue E, adjacent to the mobile fueling station that's kind of outside of Yucaipa Point, and then the rest of the center there. Chipotle is kind of the nearest adjoining use within it. It is the vacant and unimproved pad number 1 for it, and it is in the service commercial land use district. This does kind of show the site plan for the proposed Chili's restaurant. Interesting note, Chili's had been kind of considered as part of the shopping center, the Yucaipa Point Center from kind of its earliest iterations. And so they are moving forward with actually looking to construct that building. And so certainly the Yucaipa Point project was approved as 18-129 and was approved by the City Council in 2019. As part of that review, architecture review for some of the different buildings were included. And so this is an example of the Chipotle building that was approved. Kind of similar themes were proposed throughout the center with some kind of tie-in motifs, but certainly some variation was provided for the different tenants as well. Different colors for certainly the more kind of standard shop buildings as they were, but also some of the more corporate tenants such as, and kind of standalone tenants such as the Quick Quack car wash and the Jack in the Box have a little bit more kind of bespoke architecture related to their corporate design, which they require as part of going into such a center. And so we have here is the architectural review for the proposed Chili's. This maintains kind of the overall clean lines and horizontal kind of elevations for the Yucaipa Point project, but it does introduce the Chili's kind of corporate design. This is a new direction for Chili's itself, so this is their new design language that they're unveiling out, and so they're starting off with the city of Yucaipa with it, and then they are also going to be rolling this out elsewhere. Certainly, kind of the darker colors and elements that tie into the Yucaipa Point project, but certainly some of their design language. So this tile here, if you've eaten inside of Chili's, the table design, it reflects that, and so they're kind of integrating their kind of interior decorations with the exterior and kind of making it a little bit more exciting than some of the older designs that they had in the past decade or so. And so this kind of shows, again, the building elevations and then the tower for the to-go element. And then the color materials, we don't have an actual board just because they are kind of new materials that they're rolling out, but this kind of shows the look that they're going for, the different colors. And so with that, the property owner is available for any kind of questions that you guys may have, but that concludes my presentation.
Does the property owner want to make any comments to the staff, planning commission?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Robinson with Vantage One, the developer. We've tried for a long time to get Chili's to town. We were close about 7 years ago, and then COVID, building costs got out of control, and they pulled completely out of California, new development. And it's been a while, but they've decided to come back to California, and this probably will be the first store here. This is their new prototype, and we're really excited to have them as a sit-down restaurant. And I can answer any questions any of you have.
Any questions for the applicant? No, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
And I presume we have no public comment on this item that we're,
No public comment on that.
so with that, any questions, discussion, commission?
I'm just glad to see a Chili's coming to town.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I think it's a great project for the center. Glad to see you guys back, so appreciate it very much.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve number 260001, staff recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, want to ask the commission, does anybody have anything they need to disclose on the following item, number 3? Okay. If not, we'll open the public hearing on number 3. And Mr. Matlock, would you like to give the presentation?
Yeah, thank you all, Chair and Planning Commissioners. This is for case number PHE 25014, the Zossi Jewelry Store Project. This is a conditional use permit architecture review to allow the construction of a 2-story commercial building of 3216 square feet. It does include kind of the primary ground floor of 2,700 square feet, and then kind of the realtor office adjoining to it. As part of the project, there are two different variances that are also being requested. One is reduction of the parking on site, and then the other one is to allow the street side yard setback to from 15 feet to 3.3 feet along the property line. And so I will go into the details of the project. So this is technically along 3 separate parcels that total approximately 1,700 square feet in the service commercial land use district. It is kind of surrounded by a mixture of commercial uses, kind of along the west, east, and kind of south sides, including the subway that's across the street from Hilltop Drive or Yucaipa Boulevard. And there's also adjoining the off-ramp from Interstate 10 to Yucaipa Boulevard. And so as part of it, it does include kind of the 2-story. The second story is pretty minimal, it's just for additional support for the jewelry store and kind of site management for the size of the property, being able to accommodate what they need for that business, plus a small separate square foot office within it. These are uses that are allowed within the IC land use district or the CS commercial land use district. And then as part of the conditions approval, operational details and security provisions for the jewelry business is also included. And so this just kind of gives a quick highlight of the floor plan kind of within it. So this is the ground floor, and then right here, this is the small strip of the second story. And then certainly just using the grander massing of a 2-story structure helps with the architectural design theme that they were going for. And so as I mentioned, there are 2 different variances that are proposed. One is for the allowance of 7 parking spaces in lieu of 11. And then the other one is for a 3.3 foot street side yard setback along Hilltop Drive or Yucaipa Boulevard. And then there's also a 6 foot 8-inch setback along Outer Highway 10 in lieu of the required 15 feet for those streets. However, as part of the project, there's a number of different findings that were identified in the staff report for the commission to consider. One is that it is a kind of triangular site, so it's a little bit more unusual to design around. It's also on 3 parcels that total 0.39 acres. The standard lot size for commercial district property is 1 acre, so it's a legal substandard kind of lot, so it does make it a bit more challenging, along with that triangle shape. And then also has kind of roadway frontages along all sides, including Interstate 10 off-ramp, then Hilltop Drive and Outer Highway 10. And so that creates some additional setback considerations that they need to deal with. The elevation kind of changes a little bit as well, so they're trying to manage the slope from Hilltop Drive down to the west end of the site. And so that kind of creates some kind of unique elements. The setback, especially for Hilltop Drive, this is kind of an unusual roadway width, and so there's a dedication requirement to make sure that the sidewalk is wholly contained with the public right-of-way, but this is not normally, 49 is not typically a standard street half width, and so that creates a little bit of a unique element as well. Similar parcel, so the subway across the street is also in a triangle shape, but there is a piece of parcel that's owned by Caltrans but not designated as right-of-way that is there, so they're technically at 0 lot line because it's not a street side yard setback, whereas in this one it is, and so that's a bit of a unique feature as well. And then the last component is that Interstate or Outer Highway 10 dead ends, and so the traffic volumes along this stretch of the roadway versus everywhere else along Outer Highway 10 is certainly a lot less vehicles going through. There's a lot less activity and it dead ends at the city limits with the city of Redlands. And so did provide a table in the staff report of kind of the development code compliance. For all the different metrics within the development code, it does meet our requirements except for those 2 variances that are noted accordingly. And then as part of it, they are submitting the architectural review as well. There's an architectural board that we can share. But really kind of going with a contemporary design to kind of match the jewelry store kind of aesthetic. Definitely kind of vertical siding elements, stucco, and then they have some metal panels. They're using kind of decorative metal hardware and signage in a bronze theme to kind of tie in and kind of elevate the design. And then aluminum frame storefront windows. Do want to note in the agenda packet, the color palette features more kind of wood-based tones, and they're actually looking to have some flexibility for a gray tone, which is on the materials board and on this rendering here. As they're kind of finalizing their specifications for the different materials and kind of the colors, they want to make sure that whatever they pick, everything kind of works pretty well. And so they're thinking now with the specifications that more of the gray tone colors will work better than the wood tone they were originally going with. And so these are the elevations reflecting kind of the updated color scheme with it. And then site landscaping, quite a bit of landscaping around it. They do feature strawberry trees along Hilltop Drive, crepe myrtles, so flowering trees, deciduous trees along Outer Highway 10. They are also proposing there's a retaining wall on the northern kind of end of the site adjacent to the off-ramp. And so they'll be planting some acacia rindolens along here, which matches the vegetation along the slope of the off-ramp as well. So to kind of tie it in and reduce the ability for someone to graffiti on the retaining wall and kind of manage that a little bit better. And then ultimately the plans will be reviewed by the city's contract landscape architect. The project itself was noticed to surrounding properties and no comments were received, and then it is exempt from environmental review pursuant to 15.305 and 15.332 of the CEQA guidelines. As part of the project, it will be subject to development impact fees, and so this is based on the current fee schedule, what that would be. And then with it, that's staff's recommendation that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing and if it's acceptable, approve the conditional use permit variances, architectural design, conceptual landscaping, and the associated findings thereof. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff at this time? Okay, would the applicant like to do a presentation?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is John Ozasi. I'm the property owner and business owner of the project before you tonight. I'm truly excited about the opportunity to become part of Yucaipa community. One of the main reasons I chose Yucaipa is because it is known as a small business-friendly city where local businesses and residents support one another. That sense of community is very important to me. I have been in the jewelry industry in my entire life. For the past 10 years, I've independently operated both wholesale and retail jewelry business. This project represents not just a building, but a long-term commitment to operating a professional, well-managed business that I will personally oversee. I truly believe this jewelry store will fill a void not only within the city of Yucaipa, but within 10 to 20 mile radius. Our goal is to primarily serve Yucaipa residents, while also attracting customers from surrounding communities who will in turn contribute to other local businesses. This is not a short-term investment for me. I intend to operate this business personally and be a part of this community for generations. I look forward to contributing in a positive way and being a small part of Yucaipa's continued growth. I respectfully seek the support of not only the city and this commission, but also the residents of Yucaipa. I'm committed to earning that support through professionalism, integrity, and a long-term presence in this community. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the applicant at this time? All right, do we have another representative that's going to make a presentation?
He is my architect.
Okay.
Good evening. I don't think I've been in commission. I sat on planning commission probably a year or so ago. So it's my first time being back in the chambers, and I'm happy to be here presenting this project. My name is Dave Higginson. I'm with Higginson Architects. When Mr. Ozazi approached us with this site about a year or two, I don't know, it's been a while, so.
Yeah, about 18 months.
And he asked me what if this site would be developed, and I looked at it and I go, you know, that site's been vacant for I don't know how long. I mean, I can remember probably driving by it in high school. It's a very challenging site, but we feel this is an amazing gateway project to the community. Every time you go by there, it's like, you know, what would go there? And I think from the standpoint of an architect with this site and the challenges and the variances we're asking for, we think it's a very unique project. It's an exciting project for us. It's not a car wash, it's not another Starbucks. But we feel from a standpoint of people driving into the community, seeing this facility, seeing the uniqueness of it, we're just excited about being involved with the project and being able to help Mr. Ozazi bring that to fruition. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the design. It was very challenging, obviously looking at it from what Mr. Matlock talked about, the variances and the parking, but I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any comments back from the commission.
Any questions?
I have one question. Regarding the signage, knowing that it's right there at the off-ramp, it will be seen by everyone coming to Yucaipa.
Right.
I didn't see in the plans any other external or signage away from the building other than the signage on the building. Is there any intent to have any other signage for that, or is it only on the building?
I think there would be some intention for that. I think I understand that's a separate permit process. But from the standpoint of looking at it right now, we feel the illuminated sign on the building and just the focus and the lighting on the building will probably bring that business to Ozazi Jewelry. So.
Thank you.
Question, parking? Are you asking for a variance? And it says the developmental code is 1 parking space for 250 square feet, so it pencils out to 13 parking spaces. The variance is, I guess, 7 on-site parking spaces. Employees would then park on the street, something like that?
That's the intention, looking at it from the standpoint of just the type of business it is. Obviously, it's not a high demand for parking. So we obviously looking at the challenges of developing a jewelry store and then the parking requirements. So that was the intent, is looking at probably allowing spaces for customers to be dedicated for that and then employees. So it's kind of a low employee type demand on that.
Question.
I've, as you said, David, I've looked at that site forever, thinking, man, what could go there? It's such great visibility,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think it's a great project. And
Thank you.
I appreciate your landscape plan. That I know when you were on Planning Commission, you were always great at talking developers into more landscaping. So I appreciate that. And
Well, I think just again, from the standpoint of looking at people, again, how many thousands of cars come into the city every single day, and having a business or having a facility like this that's kind of, again, I call it a gateway type project.
It
That
really
you've
is.
got the Yucaipa Point that's being developed. It's an amazing development. This just kind of leads directly into that. So
And that's always been my concern. Somebody would throw something that
there's
wasn't
not
a
a whole lot.
showpiece for.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that can go on it.
Yeah.
So I think
And
it's a great project for that
I
location.
think it is.
Yeah. And again, we're looking at the finishes and working with Mr. Ozazi as far as how that comes across. And I know the original presentation was more of a wood look. We're looking at kind of being a little bit more richer. He wants the accent with the signage, and it just is really conducive to a jewelry store. So,
Thank you.
Have another question?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. Thank you for addressing the security concerns in your narrative.
okay.
Opening a jewelry store directly across the street from the on-ramp to a freeway can be inherently dangerous.
Right.
So thank you for addressing that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Other comments? I have a question, going back to the parking. And looking at the layout, and because we're giving you an exemption, or exemption to be able to park on the street there and traveling down there frequently, and looking at your site plan and that, I saw the trash enclosure in that. Is it possibly that could be moved over a little farther west and add one more parking spot on site? So we'd have a total of 8 spots on site. And because you indicated in the staff report here, I think we indicated 4 or 5 spots for reasonable spots would be on the street. And that way we achieve that 13 without parking too far down the street.
I think we could explore that, Chairman Miller. One of the challenges we have, especially with the constricted site requirements, is obviously the trash enclosure has to be accessible based on the accessibility codes and requirements. Visually, we were looking at the way it was situated. We could maybe rotate it or explore it a little bit more. I'm happy to work with staff on looking at that option. We also could work with Burtec or the trash provider to see if there are other options for the trash service for that. And again, we probably went through probably a dozen iterations of this site plan trying to figure out the best layout for it, especially in keeping with the consideration of the visual connection from the freeway and the building and a trash enclosure. So we certainly can explore that, absolutely.
Okay, but, yeah, if we look in there, if it looked like if we could move it 10 feet or so, I mean, I would like to see that just so we could add at least one more on-site parking there, if
We can
that is
explore
possible.
that. Yeah, we've got some, yeah, again, the consideration with the slope, the consideration with, we've got some power lines that are kind of within an easement area there. So, but again, we can certainly work with staff to explore that option, absolutely.
Okay, and in this, Mr. Matlock, I believe they're not required to have a dumpster there, and I imagine you generate a lot of trash.
We do not generate a lot of trash.
So actually toters could even be possibly used at that site, as
Yeah,
long as they were in a closure.
Yeah, so Mr. Higginson and I had discussion on whether or not try to reach out to Burtec to see if a modified kind of trash enclosure setup would work, just given that had kind of joked, it's not like they're throwing away jewelry in the trash, so there's not as much waste that's being generated. So.
If we could gain one more spot for Mr. Ozazi, I'm sure he would appreciate it.
I'll
So.
take it. I'll take your spot.
Absolutely. So absolutely, we'll take that into consideration.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the applicant? All right, well, thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
All right, is there any public comments on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Okay. Hearing none, then we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. We have any questions, comments before we make a motion?
Well, I've been around here for a while, and I'm just glad to see that thing on the right side, get something there. And this sounds like a great project and a great architect, and I'm glad you want to invest in our city. Yeah.
I do like this is different than what was in the packet, right? The color scheme is different?
This is slightly different. So the one in the packet was a bit more kind of brown tones.
Tanner.
Yeah.
Right. But that color scheme with that gold lettering looks very, very nice. Catches the eye. And it blends in with the surroundings. That's a very nice look. Just a comment, general comment.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve case number PLN PHE 250014 as written.
Okay. Can I ask you to modify that a little bit to try to work with staff and see if we could adapt one more parking space in there? If you could do that.
I'll make a motion to approve item number 3 as written with the provision that the applicant works with staff on the trash disposal location.
Okay, to just accommodate one more parking space there, if possible.
Yep.
Okay, that way it gives them some latitude and staff. That's okay. All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 4.
All right, so the public hearing for case number PHE 250018. It's a special use permit architectural review to allow the construction of a new detached metal RV and automobile storage garage at the rear of a property. This is a property located at 33659 Colorado Street. It's west of 18th Street within the city's RS20M or single family residential zoning district. There's currently an existing 2,200 square foot residence, and then there's also a detached garage at this location. Site plan kind of shows the location of the structure. It's technically two different garage segments. One is a 1,200 square foot garage for vehicles and roll-up doors that will be kind of facing to the west along this elevation, and then behind it, further in the rear of the property, is a proposed 960 square foot RV garage, and it does have an open entry for the RVs to back up into that area. It is located 150 or 142 feet from the public right-of-way along Colorado Street, and is in line along the side yard setback with the existing detached garage. And then access will be provided around the residence and the detached garage. Is my understanding that the applicant currently pulls his kind of RV and vehicles back around here and is able to make that maneuver, but just wants to have a storage, a covered storage for that equipment. And as part of it, because of the size of the structure as well as the metal exterior finishing, does trigger the special use permit requirement and approval by the Plan Commission. So the elevations, the picture on the left is the residence, and then the elevations are to the right. There's a 17-foot tall structure along its highest elevation as it kind of goes through this grade change towards the rear of the property. The exterior is going to be rim metal panels in charcoal gray and polar white in order to correspond to the residence colors. And then the location itself is lower in elevation compared to the house, and so with this existing garage located along Colorado Street, the proposed structure will not be visible from the right-of-way because of those elevation change in the line of sight. As part of the project review period, one public comment was received with concerns about the drainage, grading, and if the setback, and kind of the location of the side yard setback and whether or not it'll impact their views. So the site grading and drainage itself is reviewed as part of the construction drawings and building permit process. As the commission may be aware of, the side yard setback for a residential district for a typical side yard is up to 5 feet. Does allow in our development code a roof overhang of up to 2 feet. So essentially roof overhangs can be 3 feet from the property line. And so as part of a standard review, their condition, make sure that the drainage from the runoff from the roof doesn't create drainage impacts. And so it would be typical to other structures. And then the structure itself will be in line with the existing garage on site. And then certainly as part of the city's adopted code, private views are not protected. And so with that, staff recommends that the Plan Commission review the design. If they consider it acceptable, they can adopt the findings and conditions and a categorical exemption. Happy to answer any questions. And then the project applicant representative is here, and I believe the owner as well.
Thank you, Mr. Matlock. Would the applicant like to come down and do the presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jasmine Hancock with JZY Designs. As you can see, the applicant already has an RV that he stores in the rear of the property. Obviously, he wants to cover it to protect his investment of the RV. And then on the site plan that was previously shown, you'll see he has some temporary, like canvas type structures that he's currently been keeping boats and cars in. And so the structure would then be able to house those instead of having these temporary canvas style carport covers. So obviously an improvement to the property. I know the property owner did discuss the issue with the person that was having a view, which is the neighbor to the east. And I think they came to an agreement that it's, you know, it's far enough down, because of the grade change, it's really not going to impact the view. So if you have any other questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Well, I think we're good. Thank you very much. All right, do we have any public comments?
No comments on this item.
No public comments. Okay, we'll close the public hearing then. I guess I should be announcing the time of that, 7:05. Discussion among the commission? Comments? Questions of staff? Do we hear a motion?
Get the small one.
Where's the number?
That's right.
I'll motion to approve case number PLN PHE 250018 as written.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion then? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay,
Excuse me, Chair, just to confirm, was that you, Commissioner Hicks, that seconded? Okay, thank you.
okay. We're going to have a study session now, Mr. Matlock.
Yes, kind of at the request of a few, wanted to do a few kind of study sessions as we go into the 2026 year. And certainly, what better way to start than talk about housing laws? So, kind of at a high level, why is housing a concern? So I kind of use this slide as kind of an important thing in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we need food, water, and shelter as kind of the core fundamental things. And so wanting to make sure that as we plan for land uses into the future, that we're looking at the needs of the people that live in our communities and are able to accommodate it. And so kind of from the land use planning 101 that I did last year, you know, planning is about managing the growth and development of a community and providing kind of the fundamental issues associated with that growth, including our housing needs, and recognizing that the resources are limited, and so we have to make sure that we're balancing how everything comes together in order to support kind of a healthy and prosperous community into the future. And so housing challenges are certainly there. As part of the upcoming city council meeting, we'll have a discussion on kind of the vacancy rates and kind of the home ownership. And as you can see from this graph here, the vacancy rates for rental housing in particular is under 1%. Normally, 4 to 5% is kind of a general healthy kind of market where you have enough housing to kind of accommodate without it being so absolutely constricted. And so just an example, minimum wage is $15. The affordable rent for a worker at that level is $728. I did a Redfin search for a one-bedroom unit in the city of Yucaipa, and they were all above $1,300. So certainly a price disparity that is occurring, and so it drives part of the housing challenges that cities are required to look at. And so certainly that has been felt at the state legislative kind of realm. State of California has declared a housing crisis affecting every community. There's been a whole flurry of new housing laws from 2017 to today. And so the name of the game has certainly changed a lot more pressure on cities. And we'll have a follow-up study session on, in addition to just kind of the framework that we're going to discuss tonight, all the different new laws that have kind of come about and how they really kind of change when we think of our residential zoning districts, what can and cannot be allowed, and that those doors have been opened up quite a bit from 2017 to today. And so definitely very more focused housing laws than what had been developed by the state legislature in the decades preceding. So very heavy housing focus. And the statewide kind of goals is really getting housing built, making housing easier to build, removing constraints, increasing protections for renters, increasing the enforcement arm of Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, from the state, and then kind of reinforcing kind of certainty in the planning process. So if your zoning says you can do this, then you should be able to get it approved pretty easily through the city versus having a lot of roadblocks and red tape to get to what's allowed. Do want to kind of also note, as much as we kind of look at the lens of housing laws, it really isn't necessarily a partisan issue. We can kind of lament what Sacramento is doing, but as kind of prior candidates on the Republican side, Brian Dahl, Larry Elder, John Cox, and Kevin Faulkner all had housing issues identified as part of their platforms. And there's even bipartisan laws at the federal level with both parties kind of advocating for more housing development. So it's not to say that housing will disappear from, I think, the periphery of what we're going to have to deal with. It's going to be here as an issue, I think, for the foreseeable future. Certainly building groups, housing advocates, and other parties are also interested in how to improve housing opportunities. And so it's the lay of the land right now, and no matter which way kind of the wind shift, I don't think it will be an issue that disappears. Also do want to note, it's always important, don't shoot the messenger. I didn't write these housing laws. So this is a high-level view of how it kind of applies to the cities. Some of them are very complex. They have kind of very unique elements, and so I have to help manage it and guide the city to make sure we're in compliance with it. But if I had been a master planner for everything, I probably would have written very different laws, but that is not my role. And so I will just do mine here to make sure that we stay on top of things that we need to. And so certainly as the Plan Commission is aware, we do have general plan obligations. State law requires the general plan to have a housing element that is in compliance with state law. And so the housing element is required to address current and future housing needs, and it's based on now a 8-year cycle frame. So right now we're in a cycle, the sixth housing cycle from 2021 to 2029. And with that, we're supposed to facilitate the development of up to 2866 housing units. And this is spread through a few different income groups as well. This is driven by essentially a state number that was given of 1.3 million units to the Southern California Association of Governments region. So a number of different counties had to figure out how we plan out 1.3 million units. And then we have our share, which is from that. And the housing element has to plan to accommodate such development. Now, along that kind of requirement, there are a number of housing laws that apply to your review of housing projects. The chief being the Housing Accountability Act. Now, this law originally came in 1982, but really had no teeth. And so it was on the books, but no one really paid attention to it. And it really was intended to limit local government's ability to deny or reduce housing development projects that complied with the development code, and also included the builder's remedy within it. However, in 2017, what was kind of on paper, but really was more of a paper tiger, started to get some teeth through a number of passage of different laws. One of them being SB 167, which essentially said, hey, cities, if you guys are denying projects that meet your stuff, you can get fined for every single unit that is reduced. And there was also an assembly bill to accompany SB 167. There was also state law AB 1515, which essentially created a reasonable person standard. So when we look at a project, does it comply with city codes? We're not able to do like a deep legalese argument of whether or not it matches. It's a reasonable person argument. So if a judge is looking at it and goes, a normal person, can they understand what your rules are and did they meet it? That's the threshold. It's not some very pedantic argument within kind of a legalese framework. There is another law as well where it essentially says AB 3194, where if there's an inconsistency between your general plan and the zoning designation, essentially projects that are consistent with the general plan, even if it's not consistent with the zoning, are consistent. So you're applying the general plan standard. So if you have a discrepancy between what one code says and the other one, the general plan trumps the other one. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. And then last thing is SB 330 created a lot of key elements for cities and how they make housing related decisions. And so SB 330 had kind of a few different components to it. One is a no net loss provision where if a housing area or specific plan has a certain number of units that are allowed, as of January 1st, 2018, we can't reduce it. So we can't down zone a bunch of other places without up zoning another spot within it, or if it's within a specific plan, it has to be balanced within that specific plan. There's also, as part of the decision-making that the Plan Commission or City Council or staff has on individual housing projects, there are prohibition on cities creating moratoriums that limit housing or limiting the number of approvals or some sort of cap on it or kind of population limit. So any growth ordinances that were in place in cities became null and void. I'll kind of go back to my experience at the city of Redlands. They used to have a kind of a point system for housing projects, and it was the most points got awarded, they got the housing ticket for that year. That also became essentially null and void with SB 330. And then the last part is kind of the streamlining in the process. Can't have multiple hearings on a project. You're only allowed up to 5 if you require design review or require town hall as part of the city. That counts against your 5. There's also some timelines that go into effect that are important. And then certainly the certainty in the process. Subjective standards can't be used as a basis for denial. In the city, which is kind of a tough part for us, is when we get a project in and deem it complete for routing, so before it even shows up to you, we have to have an analysis of whether or not it meets our general plan and zoning code or not. If it does not, if we don't flag it as part of that review, we don't get to call it up later on. So it puts a lot more pressure on my staff to make sure that they're being thorough on the initial check of a project. That way we don't run into an issue that if there is something that's inconsistent, you guys have the ability to weigh in on that. So if there's a variance that's required or some other kind of component, we're able to weigh in on that. But if we don't flag it on the front end, we don't get to penalize them later on. So certainly adds a lot more staff processing requirements for these projects. And I like to put this on there because this is kind of a breakdown of how the Housing Accountability acts. It's not meant to be an easy read because it's not an easy law to kind of work with. So it is helpful to have that kind of context. Don't need to memorize this, but it just certainly shows kind of the different decision-making processes that go into this. And then kind of a last component that kind of weighs in on the city as we're kind of looking at housing planning is AB 166. Is the city requiring adequate sites to meet kind of the RENA numbers? There's a separate no net loss provision that comes in where if we had, let's say, planned for 100 affordable housing units on this piece of property in our housing element, and they come in with 80 is less than 100, which means that now we have a no net loss of 20 that we need to make sure that we make up for. And so as part of the decisions that the Plan Commission weighs in, if a site was identified in a housing element to provide something and it comes in different, that impacts the decision and future decisions that the city council may need to make as well. So it certainly makes the process that even if someone brings in a project that meets all of our code requirements but falls short of the housing units, means that we still have more work to do in order to make up for that project. And so, again, create some additional challenges for cities. And then certainly there is, as part of the housing element, certain provisions that come into play as part of designating our housing element sites and some site requirements that play into place. Basically, the state said, hey, especially for your affordable housing units, can't just throw a designation on the map and say that counts. If it can't be built, you don't get credit for it. If it can be built, then you need to show your work for it. And so this kind of changed the game as well. From a lot of cities that kind of threw something on the map to qualify for the state housing element, but really was infeasible. They knew it was infeasible when they put it on there. And so the state recognized that people were doing that and kind of created this law to kind of reinforce that. Do want to kind of note, as part of that, so part of the modifications here relate to section 16 or 65583-2 of the general code. For kind of frame of reference for the plan commissioners, our RM24 land use district was created in order to comply with this stuff. And so housing elements as part of the housing element sites as part of AB 1397, this statute was modified by that, but this had always retained kind of provision that as we plan for these affordable sites, they have to be a use that is by right. And so the city adopted its by right land use district of the RM24 in 2010. State law under this section does allow design review as long as it's not a discretionary action. So for example, the Yucaipa Meadows project that you guys reviewed in December essentially falls within this, that the decision of the RM24 project is ministerial. So as long as it meets the code requirements, they're able to go through. But you guys were able to weigh in the design ends because of the exceptions allowed in this that we were able to do it. I also do want to note, just for the Plan Commission as well as members of the public, This section also does establish the base density, or known as the Mullins density, no relationship to Commissioner Mullins, that the density is 30 units per acre for kind of a suburban community that we are in. As part of the housing element, we were able to justify maintaining the 24 units per acre. And so we did a lot of work and a lot of homework to justify to the state. Our neighboring cities, such as Cal Mesa and Redlands, were not able to meet those findings, and so their affordable housing density is 30 units per acre. So our RM24, rather than becoming 30 units per acre, we were able to keep it at 24, but if we were not able to do that, we would have had to amend that designation to become 30 units per acre. And then kind of another key component that comes into play with our housing projects is the density bonus procedures. And so it's a bunch of different laws that have been cobbled together over a number of decades. But high level, the idea is that in order to provide more affordable housing, developers that provide an increase in units, so the greater kind of margin on there, but designate those units as affordable, are able to get there. So it allows the more affordable units you provide, the more density you're able to get on top of the standard base density. And really it's a sliding scale. So if you're low income or very low income, the number of units provide changes what that calculation is. And so there's a handy dandy table that different law firms have provided, but we certainly have those details in our development code as well. And as part of the approval, the density bonus isn't a discretionary action. So if they say we're going to provide 15% affordable housing units, they're able to do it, and they're able to benefit from the density bonus procedures. And it isn't something that we have discretion over separately. And then it is enforceable though, so there are formal agreements that get executed, and so they do have to maintain that through, essentially at least 45 years for a project that's sold to a nonprofit, and then 55 years for all other density bonus projects. And then as part of the density bonus, so not only do you get increased number of units that you're allowed to build if you choose to do a density bonus project, but you also get things called incentives and waivers. Incentives are elements that are designed to reduce the cost of development. So they can request a number of them depending on how affordable the project is. And the nexus really is, does it reduce the cost of development for that project? So certain types of architectural standards and materials that may be required can get reduced, or let's say tree planting sizes of, larger box trees to smaller ones to reduce the cost would be an example of what would fall there. And then waivers are essentially any standard that prevents the permitted density from being achieved. There is no cap on the number of waivers, so if they're allowed to build 100 units on a piece of property with the density bonus, any development code standard that would tighten that framework, they get to request a waiver for. So if it's increasing the building height and adding an additional story, or encroaching into setbacks or reduction of parking, they're able to pull that as well. And then kind of the last component with the density bonus, they don't get to just segregate the affordable housing from the rest of the project or phase it to the very end of the project and eventually build it. It is meant to be integrated throughout the site. So as part of a fair housing kind of component, you'll have it spread through, and as part of projects that include density bonus, if they have any phasing, we make sure that they maintain the percentage ratios required throughout the phasing so that they don't run into a project that is out of compliance with our density bonus and state law. And then kind of another state law that comes into play, this is essentially a kind of a carve out for housing projects. So we have the RM24, which is by right, but we have a number of districts that are not. There's a state law, SB 35, where if we are behind on our arena requirements, which in case of Yucaipa, we are as along with many other cities, certain developers can apply a streamlined review process. There is some additional standards that they have, including prevailing wage, and they can't demolish affordable units, but this is something that is out there. We have not had any SB 35 projects come through, but other cities have. And so the state is tracking this, and they are working on some updated state laws that kind of expand this a little bit. So something to keep in mind out into the future. And then kind of the another component for housing projects when we kind of look at when we bring stuff to you guys or through the process, we have certain state mandated kind of timelines. First one is a permit streamlining that applies to a number of different projects, including residential projects. So when we get a project in, we have to review it and turn it around between the applicant with a certain time period. If we fall behind it, it becomes automatically deemed complete. And then there's some timelines for when it does environmental review, when it goes to the decision. So we can't hold a project without the applicant being engaged on that. And then certainly with SB 330, it shortened some of the timelines for the review process from what the Permit Streamlining Act happened. And then there's AB 2234, which kind of deals with the timelines for post-entitlement permits, so the building permit phase. We need to make sure that we're being responsive on that front too. So throughout the process, the city can't hold a project kind of hostage along the timeline. We have to kind of facilitate it through. So if we have certain projects that are nearing those timelines, you'll see them get kind of pushed up on the schedule. It's not because we're trying to rush one project through or another. It's because there are state mandated timeline requirements that we also have to adhere to. And then along with all the different state laws I kind of covered and kind of the general name of the game of how housing projects kind of fall within the state of California, there is an enforcement side. So we have these laws in place, and HCD does monitor our compliance. One of the examples of how they monitor is our annual progress reports that go to the city council before April 1st of every year. And so there's a number of different tables in it. It's a very exhaustive, very time-intensive progress report that we have to do, but it goes into dates of every project that's submitted for residential units. Was it approved at the number of units they proposed? Was it not? Why was it changed? What the timeline was when it went to building permits, when was the permit issued. All this data is part of what's required. And certainly this is the state's way of kind of making sure that the contract of the housing element that they certified is upheld. They view the housing element as a contract between the city and the state. And then certainly, if we fail to comply, HCD can revoke our housing element. There's a few different ramifications with it. One is, some grants and other funding could be lost, but the bigger issue is what's called the builder's remedy, which I had mentioned kind of before. The purpose of that law essentially says that, when we review projects for consistency and compliance with the general plan and zoning code, if you don't have a certified housing element, you don't have a valid general plan. And so therefore, you can't value the inconsistency with the general plan as part of the housing project. Essentially, it says your general plan doesn't count because it's not valid, and so they kind of default to higher density standards under state law. And so that is a remedy that's kind of come through with all these kind of reinforcement of state laws. And so cities that have run into this issue have not been very happy with the decision-making. If a project comes in and is submitted through the builder's remedy, even if we get compliance with the general plan housing element afterwards, but before they're approved, they're still grandfathered into the builder's remedy process. And so that creates some challenges, certainly for residents that go, hey, this project doesn't meet our code, but we kind of have our hands tied. Certainly, as I mentioned, hefty fines as well. As if we deny a project that meets all of our code stuff or reduce the units, we can be fined up to $10,000 per unit. And then bad faith actors can actually have a more severe penalty as well. And then certainly, as much as HCD is an enforcement mechanism, they're not the only ones that are paying attention to the decisions cities make and whether or not they're approving projects. The developer for a housing project that, let's say, gets unfairly reduced based on the code standards, they will also sue and start the violation process as well. So there's certainly a number of different avenues where the enforcement mechanism can come to play. And so kind of where do we go from here? Certainly the consistency and transparency remains key. If our general plan that is compliant with the housing element certified, as long as we have those rules in place and maintain, if you meet this, you're able to be approved. That really is important. It's important to remember that while the state has some new kind of requirements, they still allow the cities to apply objective standards. And so we get to set the rules in terms of what the projects look like. And so having policies that encourage the development that we want to see, rather than just trying to stop ones that we don't, make a lot more of a difference. It also makes it a lot easier for developers to say, okay, if the city wants us to jump this high, let me know how high to jump. And if they can do that, it's very easy for everyone. And so it does streamline the process. And so as part of a customer service and kind of business-friendly approach, that is an important factor to weigh in. And then it's also, as part of the state law, while affordable housing is kind of the more challenging one to get built, state law kind of reiterates that housing at all income levels is still important. So while affordable housing has its own set of challenges, market rate and above market rate housing is also still important to see accomplished for every city. And then I do also want to kind of note, especially for Plan Commission, the public comments that you guys may get on different projects, we do get a number of calls about, that there isn't enough housing options. So I mentioned the low vacancy rates. I had a call earlier this week on someone that's trying to find, housing for their relative, and the, single family house that they had before really wasn't quite suiting it. And so those calls aren't something that you're going to see at public hearings, but we do get those calls or emails of people looking for, suitable housing opportunities for their phase of life in Yucaipa. And so, as much as these kind of state laws are very difficult and some kind of silly, there is a need for good housing options. And so that's not something you guys are going to get at the dais, but we do get those calls frequently enough that it's worth mentioning. So that concludes my study session for this. I will have another housing element study or housing law study session on all the kind of newer stuff that's come through, such as SB 9, which allows kind of 2-unit splits or urban lot splits, and kind of other stuff, just so you have a good kind of sense of, we have our zoning code, we have all these kind of requirements, but there's also a number of other stuff that we as staff have to provide information on, and certainly is a much different environment for housing project approvals from, what it was at the start of my career, and certainly, 20, 30, 40 years ago. The name of the game has changed tremendously, so. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. I know it's rather dense and not necessarily lively planning topics, but.
Can we get a copy of that emailed to us, the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I was on the general plan, and one of the things we looked at to maybe meet the need or try to meet a need on the affordable housing density stuff was Crafton. And I'm wondering if you have an update on how that's been going in the last 9 years to provide affordable housing in that area.
So it is still moving forward, and I actually had someone reach out recently on that. Crafton Hills, we have the overlay district that allows a little over 400 units on it, including about 396 multifamily units on it. Really the biggest challenge with that site is the split ownership along kind of the north and south. And so you can kind of design projects independently, but it's not very efficient, and the infrastructure gets a little kind of wonky. And so it's trying to get someone to work together between the two different property owners to develop it will, I think, kind of maximize the gains on what that would come to fruition. And so that's always been kind of a challenge, is someone kind of works through a deal with one and then they go to the other property owner and then it just kind of falls apart. And so I think there's been more movement as of late, but that's always been a challenge for that site.
Do you have any idea if the new city manager has this as a high priority to mediate that problem?
That I am not aware of, but I can certainly follow up on it. Certainly, we do have a few different things to kind of help it. It's included in our enhanced infrastructure financing district boundaries as well. So there's a few things trying to get the stars to align. But, when you're dealing with private parties and property owners, the deals that they're trying to work through, it's is finding the right deal to come through, and it's not always as easy as we can hope for. So,
This is a joke, but maybe Steve Wyckoff and Kushner can get over here and work a deal.
Ben, currently today, we have two multifamily zonings. We have RM zoning, which is 8 units an acre, and then we have RM 24. And we don't have any designation, anything in between, other than if there is density bonuses. Is that correct?
yeah, so except for the freeway corridor, yeah, that's the case. It's either kind of 8.7 units, which is not really high density, or very high density, and there's nothing really kind of in that middle.
Okay, so in the project that we reviewed back in December, apartment project, that was 173 units and went to 250 units or so on that architectural review. Basically, that project was brought forward in a public hearing in that, but they had to do a general plan amendment to accommodate that because we don't have tiered zoning that would in line exactly to what was approved. So in turn, they got that, so it gave them an option to increase it in the future. Now, with that, they have 6 years to build that out, to maintain that project, but the zoning stays with it,
Yes, that is correct.
okay? So with that, then that changes our arena numbers. So because we have approved a project now of, let's say, 100 or 250 some units, so that adds to our arena numbers that we have, so that if it never gets built, we don't get penalized for it because it was approved.
Yeah, that is correct. So it helps with our kind of initial review. It shows steps that we've gotten towards that. And then also on that no net loss kind of provision, so the AB 166 and SB 330, it helps along that front too, where we've added some additional units. We've added some more affordable units that weren't planned. And so if another project comes through that's a little bit less elsewhere, we're able to kind of float that a little bit more effectively. And so it's a little bit of a kind of horse bartering a little bit in terms of the, especially the AB 1 or SB 1, AB 166 kind of provision. So,
Okay, so I'm gonna give a wild number. Let's say we go out and we approve 2,000 units, and we're gonna have 20% of those be low-income units in that. We're gonna come real close to meeting our goal for our numbers, even though none of them may get built.
that's certainly part of it. Ultimately, the state's looking for them to get built, but they also recognize that the cities don't build housing, and so our mandate in the housing element is to facilitate it and show how we've done steps to get there, and then ultimately is seeing it get built. Certainly, there is, as part of the housing element provisions, there's also a housing constraints analysis that goes with it. So we've approved a bunch of stuff, but stuff doesn't get built. When we go into the next housing cycle, we'll have to do an analysis of, okay, where is this discrepancy happening? Is it something that we can control, or is it something kind of broader? And so, so it's not to say if we approve it and never gets built, we're off the hook. It may beget other conversations later on.
Okay. Define low income. I know when I was on the commission back 10 years ago or so, we had a project that was come forward and they had low income, and as soon as they started to break out what was low income, I watched people leave the audience because it was like they said, well, hell, I make less than that. And
Yeah.
if they left the room, they weren't concerned. So because I understand that will float or adjust in areas. Like in the Riverside, San Bernardino County area, the low-income housing number is lower than, or income is lower than it would be, let's say, in LA.
Yeah, no, so low income is below 80% of the AMI or area median income. Let me pull up, I'm gonna pull up the numbers just for kind of frame reference, but when we've done examples, teacher starting out, or even a law enforcement officer with the county sheriff's department, usually falls within kind of that low income thing. And so it is a interesting analysis. Hold on, let me pull up Sam.
Can I add something while you're looking there, man?
Yep.
A little bit back to Mr. McHouston's question about the College Village Overlay District that Ben provided some context on. I just wanted to highlight, as we've started a new year here with the new city manager, at our last council meeting on the 9th, City Council did adopt 7 new goals. And so if you haven't had a chance to review those, I can read them to you, but the presentation's available on YouTube, and there may be some information in the context of those goals that speaks to your question regarding priorities for this next calendar year. So just wanted to highlight that. There were 7 goals. Some of them are a little bit similar to last year, and some of them were newer, so just wanted to highlight that. Number 7 happens to be ensuring public infrastructure keeps up with the needs of businesses in the community. And so down in that area, what comes to mind is some of the street improvements that were constructed a few years ago with widening around Tennessee Street between 16th and 15th. So.
Okay, so the page for the AMI is not loading right now. I actually had it up not that long ago, but so I apologize. I don't have that number in front of me, or it's not wanting to pull up on it. But yeah, if you look at so if it's under the HCD keeps saying the numbers, but it's based on the San Bernardino County. So San Bernardino County AMI is actually higher than the city average, but so it applies the county number. But yeah, certainly the different professions and workers that qualify for a low income, I think, is usually a shot to most people when they kind of view what is a low income household and what actually it is. So it's a little startling, but it kind of represents that. And even as part of the discussion we'll have at the city council on Monday, certainly, the number of households in Yucaipa that spend over 35% of their, household income towards housing is also pretty notable as well.
Okay. With relationship to senior housing and that, they count the same numbers as it would be if it was an all-age development, correct? There's no adjustment to that, to the RENA numbers?
Not necessarily. So the senior housing is age restricted, so it does provide a benefit to some of our housing needs, but you'll usually see some sort of affordability kind of paired with it. Because of the smaller size of senior housing units, they tend to also be a little bit lower income, lower rents. And so while they may not be deed restricted for affordable housing, they may sometimes still kind of fall within that number based on what their expected rents are. But some are more luxury based and some are.
Yeah. So if we were talking to a senior housing developer or whatever, and we said, well, if you designated to our lower, or designated so many units to lower income, which they probably are already, that would help us on our lower income units, right? Or numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would the affordable housing apply to our mobile home parks? I don't recall on that one.
So because state law requires us to plan as part of the RENA for new housing, or, essentially supporting future demand, the mobile home parks do not count towards that. However, the preservation of affordable units is still another kind of priority. So the housing element is looking at housing for kind of everyone and includes both what our planned housing is, which is the harder part, because it's the projects that, hey, your neighbor's allowed to build this here. But certainly looking at existing housing stock is also part of the housing element. How do we make sure that housing stays affordable? How do we provide, resources to it? As part of the housing element, one of the programs that we have is some of our place-based investments. So all the, drainage and flood improvements we've done, along, Wilson Creek and all that stuff is part of our housing element kind of strategy where we've reduced, the flood risk to existing residents and done, acres, and all that stuff plays into, what are we doing to plan for future housing, but what are we doing for existing residents and their housing stock as well to make sure that, we have suitable housing for everyone that, either already lives here and wants to stay in their house or, it's a different phase of life. Can they go to where they need to go? And so it's a multifaceted kind of element and goes into all those different stuff.
Brandon just brought up in here in San Bernardino County, AMI used to set affordable housing eligibility, including very low income, up to 46,600
That's for a very low?
for very low.
Yeah.
And then up to 74,550 to moderate, and up to 113,400 is income for four-person household, what it says. So give us an idea of what we're looking at.
Yep.
I think some people think low-income housing is somebody that's making $1,000 a month or something. So,
Yeah, no, that, and it's, yeah, that type of number is extremely low. And so, yeah, certainly the range, I think most people trying to realize, if they were to see those numbers, would realize that they're either in kind of a low or moderate income. And so making sure that we're able to provide for that.
okay. Other questions? All right. And you said that at our next meeting, you're going to have another presentation, another study session on some of the other housing development.
Yeah, I'll kind of go into some of the different state laws that have kind of come into play that kind of change a little bit of how we think of what you can do on your residentially zoned piece of property. That we'll probably have a meeting, the second meeting in March. We do have the kind of the first week. There'll be a few of you guys that will be going to the Planning Commissioners Academy. And so some of them will get a sneak peek of those stuff through their legislative update, and then we'll carry it back and bring it for the rest of the commission.
Okay. Just touch on zoning. You mentioned about being, let's say we have an area that's zoned RM20, or not RM10, we're just 20,000 square foot lots, okay? And there's a state law out there where you could actually split that lot today into a quarter-acre lot?
Yes, and so that'll be SB 9 I'll go into, and then there's also another law that's a bit more interesting, which is it's like the middle. I have it pulled up. Starter Home Revitalization Act, which allows kind of 10-unit projects on single-family lots that are a certain size. So quite a few different laws that I'll go into on the next one, but yeah, certainly a lot more opportunities if you're a property owner with a little bit of land on what you can do with it than what you had before.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Do you have any announcements?
No, that's it.
When do you anticipate our next meeting?
I think it'll be the second meeting, scheduled meeting for March.
So not the first week, but the third week of
Yep.
March, we'll have you have an idea of how many projects, or will we have, or what may?
There's probably 2 other projects I think that will probably be ready for that one.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll have we've had a little bit of kind of staffing stuff. Maddie, who's been on maternity leave, comes back next week, so I'm very excited to see her back, and so we'll get back into our normal rhythm of stuff because yeah, she was always very good at keeping stuff moving. So
Okay.
Well, you've been holding the fort down well, Ben.
I've been trying.
Yeah. Any announcements? Hearing none, we're adjourned.